He's a veteran that served in Iraq, a passionate anarcho-capitalist, and the leading libertarian candidate for president in 2020. Adam Kokesh, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, brother. Appreciate it.
So we have the technology where we, can create enough products for us to survive, harvest enough food, more than enough food to eat, build more than enough housing to live in. But because of the distribution of money, people can't afford this overabundance of food and housing. As somebody who does think the idea of universal basic income is totally worth considering, I know Gary Johnson said he was open to the idea when he ran in 2016. That seems like a solution to the problem of having this overabundance of resources, thanks to technology and innovation, capitalism. That's a way that people can actually access these resources, redistribute the money in a much fairer way than our current welfare system, more efficient. Kind of saying everybody has a right to a basic minimum standard. So,
I might argue that would be a step sideways, but yeah, you can point out how certainly things could be made a lot better by welfare reform with government. I just wouldn't trust government to handle such a system.
Well, I would concede to you that it could be done through cryptocurrency somehow, some kind of form of universal basic income. So, if you don't support universal basic income, well, let me know. Do you not support it, or would you be open to it? I'm curious.
So when you say universal basic income as a government policy, absolutely not. When you talk about the general idea of humanity being so productive that we're capable of providing an abundance for anyone who asks for it, absolutely. I don't think at that point you would use the term universal basic income. I think we would just be so productive as a society that anybody in need could walk up to a kiosk, or I know this is just off the top of my head science fiction fantasy here, but we would be so able to benefit from the value of 1 hour of human labor that an individual person, if they were in need, could go in somewhere and say, I want to work for an hour, and they could have enough cryptocurrency or whatever to feed themselves for a week at least. And I think we're kind of approaching that naturally. I think that's a much a more fair way of doing that in a more sustainable way that doesn't put the power to control a big centralized system in everybody's hands. I think if we get rid of government, at least down to the community level, we unleash our capability as a species to be productive, to take care of each other. The value of 1 hour of human labor will be worth so much that we will be able to take care of people, and it'll just be less expensive for society. I mean, it is more expensive right now. You look at homelessness, the medical problems that leads to. If we could just deal with homelessness more productively, where we're addressing it proactively rather than retroactively when it gets to be too much of a problem on the individual level, and you have runaway drug addiction.
Well, how would you address it? How would you address homelessness proactively? To me, it seems like giving people the money they need to survive with afford the basic standards of living. That's a proactive way of fighting homelessness. How would you fight homelessness?
Well, in my community in Juniper Wood Ranch in Arizona, we have a food bank. And so one of the things that I've done for my contribution is I built a really big bird run. And so I have a lot of chickens, and we're still building this out. I haven't been there quite long enough, but all of the leftover bread, and we get a lot of bread that comes through the food bank. It's operated by the church there. And they take the excess bread and they bring it to me, and so it goes to feed my chickens, and then the eggs go back to the food bank. At least that's what we're working up towards. So that's one of the things that I've developed in my community, at least, that I'm excited about as a way that just me as a guy with land who built a bird run can now have chickens and turn leftover bread into eggs for people who need it. And that's just one little example. But when it comes to answering that question as a presidential candidate, the answer is I'm going to empower communities to figure that out for themselves. I'm going to make sure that you have your full resources available to you that you need to be able to meet human needs in your community. And it's going to be different from community to community. I don't want to force people into a one-size-fits-all solution. I can tell you about what I'm doing. I can tell you about what I see in other communities that I like. But that's just an expression of my personal preferences. Politically, it's that I don't want to use violence of a central authority to impose a one-size-fits-all solution on you.
Well, I I can't argue with that. I feel like the universal basic income, I can stop talking about it soon, but I think the universal basic income is kind of that solution that doesn't force you, everybody, this one size fits all solution. Everybody gets to determine what's the best way for them to spend the money for them and their community. Obviously, that's not the case in the current welfare system. You have to spend X amount of dollars on food at, you have these stores as an option, etc.
And some communities have a system that they call the universal basic income, and everybody's happy with it, and they're not forcing it on anybody. And I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. If it's voluntary, they're not, if it's ethical, if it's not based on any kind of coercion from the system top to bottom, and it's making people happy, I'm all for it.
Okay, so in the way that you voluntarily give, your excess eggs from your homestead to the homeless, I'm with you in that I think a lot of people would do that. I think, people would voluntarily do that, but they would need the time and freedom to do that. Now, I know you're all about freedom.
Oh, hold on. That's a really easy one. The average American works for government half the year. Right? The average working American works for government half the year. If you look up, you look at your paycheck, obviously you see about 30% lopped off there. But when you add up all the fines, fees, and hidden taxes and everything else from government, it adds up roughly to 50%. You're going to have that time back.
Okay. Hey, sure, government bureaucracy takes up a lot of our time. I don't doubt that. But another thing that takes up a lot of our time is most Americans, the more poor you are, the more of a wage slave you are. You have to dedicate most of your waking hours to submitting to somebody else and, doing what they want you to do all day in order to just get by. So how do you solve this problem of, wage slavery? What's your solution to that? Because clearly you see that this doesn't have to be this way because of the abundance afforded to us through technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again,
how do you solve wage slavery? Is it correct me? It seems like you think if you just eliminate the federal government, somehow, wage slavery ends? Somehow people...
I would say that as a result of other economic effects of abolishing the federal government, dissolving the federal government, we wouldn't, I can't say eliminate wage slavery, because what we're talking about is localizing government, really not eliminating it. And this first step of eliminating the federal government and getting down to the states, it does not complete the process, and really is not so much a fundamental transformation of government as it is cutting the most destructive, wasteful layer of fat off the top. It's only 3 million out of 22 million government employees within the United States who work for the federal government. So you get it down to the state level, you're still going to have the same basic dynamics. However, again, if you're working for government half the year, let's say we're able to just reduce that to 1/3. Right now, it's just the payroll taxes, whatever, at the state level, and all of those other hidden costs that the state is still imposing on you. Right away, you're freed up so much of your labor, of your time available for pursuing other interests, for starting your own business, for saving, so that instead of being a wage slave and thinking that you just have to work, 9 to 5 continuously just to get by, just to maintain a basic standard of living.
You think you have to, we have to.
Well, I think a lot of people are tricked into believing that. A lot of people are really capable. I think, again, to turn that to a bigger problem, part of the government-run school system's objective is to beat down your creativity, your entrepreneurial spirit, to condition you to be a cog in the machine, because that's what the people who sponsor the system want. So, no, I do think there's a big role to play just in, for getting the mentality of education shifted away from the federal Department of Education's demands back down to the community's demands, which are ultimately much closer to the needs of the individual students. I'm a fan of unschooling personally, but
I think you make a great point. So
I mean, you want the wealth to be shared equitably. If we get rid of the part that's being stolen from us right away, even if you are in a position where you're a wage slave today, you have no extra valuable skills in the market. You're working at McDonald's and that's all you got. Right now half of your income is going to government. Imagine if all of a sudden you had to work half as much and you could maintain the same quality of life and comfort. You could have that time either just to enjoy life and relax. You could go into work and say, well, now it's only 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, or now I work 6 months on and 6 months off. And you have that other time available to pursue your own business, to be an entrepreneur, to pursue creative ventures, to do things that are moving humanity forward, to be a participant in the great human conversation, the great march forward of humanity that we are being held back from right now.
I have to correct you. I don't think that a McDonald's employee, if you eliminate income tax like you want to do, that doesn't mean the McDonald's employee earns twice as much and has to work, half as many hours, because the McDonald's employee doesn't make enough money to pay taxes. Half
they pay taxes.
Not income tax.
And that's true that in a lot of places, for someone at the bottom rung, you don't see that. But half of Americans, I think it's important for people out there, like half of Americans would not benefit directly from eliminating the income tax. If you go and look at the price of consumer goods in the United States, and you look at how much of those go to taxes, even if you eliminated those, because when you buy a consumer product, it's gone through several layers of taxation already. It's been taxed at production, it's been taxed at whatever the resource gathering, it's been taxed at processing, at packaging, at wholesale, and at retail. So right away, again, the purchasing value of your dollar goes way up when you eliminate those things. Everybody benefits from this.
Can you?
But as you know, like whenever we're stuck on the dollar system, right? The Federal Reserve System, they create more money in Washington D.C. through fractional reserve banking with the banks locally. Even what they're doing is devaluing the dollar in your pocket. They're making the value of your paycheck lower, whatever it is, and it's the rich who get richer through the system, while the poor get poorer. And the thing about the Trump tax cuts, you might think as a libertarian, I go, yeah, tax cuts, and yeah, I kind of there's some aspects that are good about that. But if the government keeps spending the same, and Trump has said almost nothing about cutting government spending, then we're still paying for it. That they don't create value out of nothing. They create money out of nothing. And money, when they create it that way, is an illegitimate claim to value. And so the effect is always that the poor and working class are disadvantaged the most by this system.
And I guess where we disagree is that I don't think they would be disadvantaged less if it's, if they're still in a position of wage slavery. Like, do you want to try and communicate another way how, wage slavery, how the poor would be better with you if you eliminate the federal government?
Okay, so
and in the process, the welfare state.
So first of all, what we're going to be able to do with the welfare state is really amazing, because so much has been stolen from us that when we liquidate the federal government, we're going to be able to spin Social Security off as a private institution and have it funded for many decades to come. When it comes to the average wage slave today, and I really think that's a demeaning term. I really think it's unnecessary. I think it kind of traps people in that mentality. And I don't use it very often, but it is worth identifying people who feel that in the current circumstance, that is their only option, to work a 9-to-5 that they hate to maintain a certain quality of life. All I can say, because I don't want to be a central planner. I don't want to run the economy. That always leads to disaster, and it's unethical. So if there is going to be any central planning of any economic things, it should be done at the community level, not at the global or big, highly concentrated level.
I am so with you, Adam. I really am with you on that. I just wonder if the best way to do that, I think there might be a smoother transition with with a universal basic income. I think that creates a smoother transition. That's has a localizing effect, because the communities get to choose how to spend that money. And all the while you're eliminating government waste and bureaucracy. Go ahead.
You could be right. But if that's the case, I will say that the only ethical way to do it is on a voluntary basis at the community level.
Okay. And can you explain what, why, just your libertarian principles? That's the basic,
Sure.
Put that in a nutshell for me and everybody else.
Yeah, the entire philosophy that I espouse is called voluntarism, and it's based on the ideal of all human interactions being voluntary as opposed to coercive. So that means that they are free of force and fraud and coercion. And so this is based in the concept of self-ownership. I own myself. You, as an independent, beautiful human being, you have possession over your mind, your body, and this is the foundation for ethics. So it's wrong. It's morally wrong for me to use violence against you or force against you, to violate your self-ownership in any way. And really, this is the foundation of capitalism, that there is free exchange, right? That there is no gun in the room saying, no, you can't do that. You know, a third party coming into a relationship saying that we're going to take a tax out of something. But self-ownership, again, as I said earlier about capitalism, it's ownership of the ultimate means of production, the individual human being. So when we apply this philosophy to government, it's really just taking basic ethics and applying it to government. It's wrong for me to put a gun to your head and say, give me half your income. So it's just as wrong if I have a shiny badge on and I put a gun to your head and say, give me half your income. It's still wrong if we're on a desert island and there's two guys on my side against you and we're the majority, give me half your income. No government trickery, no fancy written law can change that basic ethic premise that it is wrong to violate someone's self-ownership. And when it comes to being productive, that we create the most happiness for this, when human relationships are voluntary, it means that you choose to participate. You're never forced to work with, to be with, or to trade with someone who you don't want to, which means that all of your relationships are ones that you have chosen because they enrich your life. At the moment you don't enjoy that relationship, you are free to turn away.
Okay, I think everybody would really agree with you on that. I mean, how can you disagree with the non-aggression principle? But you'd be surprised. You're talking about how you should have, every human should have the freedom to choose a relationship, to leave a relationship if they can. But again, with capitalism, and as long as our system revolves around money, we're dependent. We don't really have a real choice to say no, a completely free choice. There's coercion involved. We have to submit to an employer if we want to earn enough money to just to survive. We have to submit most of our waking hours. That doesn't sound like freedom. Now, I know in the past, it made sense, but now with technology where there's enough for us to live without doing that, it's just, I don't see how you can advocate for, a system. You can say you're advocating for a system of freedom when there's still wage slavery unnecessarily. Hold on. No. Hold on. That's not fair, because you're confusing the ideal that I'm advocating with the policy that I'm advocating. So in the ideal that I'm advocating, with today's technology, I can say wage slavery will be insignificant. It'll be by choice. It'll be a very rare thing. But how we get there in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner is by localizing government, taking it apart from the top down, decentralizing power. So when I say that, no, I can't promise you when we eliminate the federal government and we have 50 independent states, that some states might still be so enforcing of the current, wealth disparity or creating new ones that it's going to be perfect in every state. Because what I'm doing with my campaign is turning the United States presidential election into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to continue to exist at all. And I'm asking the American people for the authority to become the bankruptcy agent, the custodian. And when I resign, that's what my title will actually be, custodian of the federal government of the United States, for the purpose of carrying out the bankruptcy plan laid out in this executive order. That's the first major step. Decentralize the federal government, get it down to states, territories, and sovereign native nations. From there, I think people are going to be so excited about all the benefit that they got from that. They're going to say, let's keep going. Let's get government down to the county level. And at that point, you're going to see some counties already able to adapt and decentralize and replace their coercive systems with nonviolent systems. Some counties are really big and have big cities and are going to take a longer time to phase out of that. But see, this is the thing that unites people.
because it's the everybody gets what they want strategy. You want government to do this? Fine. You can have it in your community when we're not forced into this one-size-fits-all solution. You're a liberal, you live in a liberal state. You're a conservative, you live in a conservative state. I'm not even asking you to give up your core values or to change them or even your concept of what government is. I'm just asking you to consider how much better off everyone would be if government were localized and you had more say in how your community was run.
Please hit the like button, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.
Matt Orfalia, I guess that's how you pronounce it.
YouTuber Matt Orfalia.
A YouTuber named Matt Orfala.
Wow, somebody knows me.
Absolutely, baby. We watch your videos. We make them go viral.
Is education a crime? People were enjoying it.
All right, let's walk out here.